Simpson with Simpson Math. Let's look at some relative frequency displays. We've made some frequency displays where we showed the frequency, the number of data sets in each category. First, we made frequency tables that just show how many there are in each category. So in this case, the gifts were chosen, and our example says 80 visitors to a local community college were given a chance of 4 gifts. 40 visitors chose t-shirts, 20 chose a coffee mug, 10 chose water bottle, and 10 chose a bumper sticker. And so our frequency table just shows that there were 40 t-shirts chosen, 20 coffee mugs, 10 water bottles, and 10 bumper stickers. That was our frequency table. And we also made a bar graph that showed those same frequencies, that we had 40 t-shirts, 20 coffee mugs, 10 water bottles, and 10 bumper stickers. In this video, we're going to look at turning those into relative frequency displays. So 40 in relation to how many. Is 40 a big number? Is it a small number? It kind of depends on how many are in our total set. So when we talk about a relative frequency display, in order to turn this into a relative frequency table, all I'm going to do is take my 40 and tell you how many total that it's out of. So it was 40 out of, well, how many total visitors were there? We could add up all the numbers to find out, or within our example, it tells us there were 80. So to make this into a relative frequency, I just turn this from 40 into 40 out of 80. Or we can reduce that fraction down to 1/2. We could also write that as a percent. We could write it as 50%. Here, that 20, again, I'm just going to show it out of what? To make it into a relative frequency distribution, we just take that and show out of the total number of 80. Again, I'm going to reduce that fraction. 20 over 80 is equal to 1/4. So we could write it as 1/4, that simplified fraction, or we could also show it as a percent, because a percent is also just a fraction. So 1/4 is the same as writing 25%. Here, I could write that as 10 out of 80, or just 1/8. So 10 out of that total number, and here as well, 10 out of that total number, or 1/8. So in a relative frequency distribution, all we do is take each one of our frequencies and put it over the total amount to show the fraction of people who chose that gift. So instead of saying the number that chose the gift, this title now needs to become the fraction that chose the gift. Or if I had made them percents, my label would just say percents that chose. Now it is a relative frequency display. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to turn it into a relative frequency display. So instead of counting by 5s, I need to count by that fraction, or maybe by the percent. I can use the fractions that I made here. I know that this one is 1/2. I know that this one is 1/4, and I know that the water bottle down here is 1/8. I can also just take that and put it over the 80. So 5 out of 80 is equal to 1/16. So really, I am counting here by 1/16. If I count up by 1/16, here it's 1/16. The next one would be 2/16. But 2/16 reduces to 1/8. Hey, that's the same as what we got there, 1/8. Then the next one, 1/16, 2/16. The next one would be 3/16. That doesn't reduce. 4/16 does reduce to 1/4. The next one is 5/16. Then 6/16, which reduces 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into 16 8 times. So 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, and then the last one is 8/16 or 1/2. So I've turned this bar graph that showed frequencies into a relative frequency bar graph. Again, instead of having the number chosen, now this is the fraction chosen. Or if we write it with our frequency, we could say it's the frequency over the total number in our sample there of people who chose gifts. Or if it's a population, you can make it a capital N. So all you do to make a frequency distribution into a relative frequency distribution is change it into a fraction, show out of the total number. Here, we can do the same thing with our M&Ms. So our M&Ms, we made a frequency table to show that there were 17 brown M&Ms in the bag. I'll read the example real quickly. I recently purchased a bag of M&Ms. The M&Ms were in 6 colors. A quick count showed there were 50 M&Ms, 17 brown, 18 red, 5 yellow, 5 green, 2 blue, and 3 orange. So we showed the frequency of each of the colors on our frequency table and on our bar graph. Now we're going to turn these into relative frequency displays. And all we have to do that is make it into a fraction or a percent. So I'm going to take that 17 and put it over 50. Let's turn it this time into a percent. So 17 over 50, remember that percent is always out of 100. To get this bottom to 100, we would multiply by 2. So we would also multiply the top by 2. So this is equal to 34%. We can do the same thing here. Our 18 is 18 over 50. Again, percent would have a denominator of 100. Multiply the bottom by 2, multiply the top by 2. So this is equal to 36%. Turn that denominator into a percent sign. 5 out of 50, multiply the top and the bottom by 2, so that's equal to 10%. And so this one as well will be equal to 10%. 2 out of 50, multiply the top and the bottom by 2, and you get 4%. And last but not least, 3 out of 50, or multiply by 2, top and bottom, and you get 6%. So 6% of my bag was made up of orange M&Ms. So to show that relative frequency display, I'm going to show it in percents. I just took each one of those and put them over the total number of M&Ms that there were, changed those into percents, and now my label needs to say the percent of each color in a bag. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to count by those percents. I'm counting by 2s here, but if we notice that the 2s was 4%, so I'm really counting by 4% here. So if this one is 4%, if I continue to count by the percent, this would be 8%. This would be 10%. This would be 12%. Oh no, I quit counting by, that didn't make sense. That's 12%. This is 16%. That makes more sense because multiply by 2. 20%, count by 4s. Remember 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. 24%, 28%, 32%, 36%, and then last but not least would be 40%. And we can check ourselves by noticing that our brown should make it up to 34%. Well, in between 32 and 36 would be 34%. Again, instead of having the frequencies now, I have the percent of those colors in a bag. So to create a relative frequency display, all we do is take our frequency displays and rewrite those frequencies over the total number. Create that fraction or turn it into a percent to show that out of the whole, how many are there? Math Made Simple is Simpson Math. Thanks for watching.